Greetings everyone, this is Mar, and once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title there, it is another literature review. This one's going to be a little interesting because instead of reviewing a novel, short story, or anything else like that, it will be a play. It's a play I had to read for the last part of my English 106 class, and like 103 it went short stories, poetry, and then finally drama. And this is a poem that I had. Now, this is a play I had not read before, not come into contact, but technically I've heard of it before through the film adaptation that they did a couple years ago that Denzel Washington starred and directed. That, of course, is August Wilson's play from the 80s, Fences. Now, a interesting little caveat to this is that the original Broadway production and the production from which we saw a scene of it to do an analyzation of staging for the class had James Earl Jones in the title role. So it's interesting to compare how Jones interprets this main character versus how Denzel Washington did. Let's just say from how it's written, Jones is closer to the mark. But how Washington does it in the film, who knows? I'll have to watch the whole film. So maybe one of these days you'll see a review of the film adaptation and then I'll tell you how faithful it was to the play. Now, digging into the play itself, the play, it is a very interesting read, and if I ever see a production of it nearby on a day I'm off, I will go and see it. The play takes place in 1957, so this is during the height, or right before the height of the Civil Rights era, and race relations is one of the central themes. It's kind of in the background a little bit, because the major theme seems to be family, but it is there and it is touched on at times, mostly with the main character of Troy. He's a working class family man. He works for a garbage company. He's one of those that sit on the back of the truck and dump the garbage into the back. And you can tell that he really is loyal to his family, but there's just something about him that makes him a little unlikable. For one, he seems to treat his son a little bit with disdain, but it seems to tie in with that old mentality of fathers being in charge of the family, a little bit of the seen not heard mindset, and also the family is my responsibility, I take care of my flesh and blood, which that part you can understand and respect him for, but just the manner in which he goes about it, you really don't like the guy. Because there's one scene in particular that really stood out, and that's a scene where Troy and his son are talking, and his son asks him point blank, why isn't you never like me? And he basically dodges the question by saying that he takes care of him, and liking you was never part of the equation. Which that right there really sums up how he feels, at least towards his son, and that is, he might love him on the inside, but he just doesn't talk about it, but he comes across as someone who just treats his family as an afterthought with that. And what adds into this is the fact that later on in the play, he cheats on his wife. Now, they hint at this in the first part of the play, and there is some dialogue that foreshadows this, but in the end, when he admits that he did it, boy, that's when he really becomes unlikable. And just the way he justifies his cheating, it's like, really, dude? That's your justification? He essentially tells his wife, Rose, that the woman he cheated on her with just makes him feel different, gives him a different idea of himself. He even uses a baseball analogy to it, that I've been standing on first base for 18 years, I figured I'd go to try for second, and it's like, really, man? That's your excuse that she made you feel different? Come here, Troy. Not a good idea. And Rose throws it back at him, and you really feel for her with this, because Troy betrayed her. They're still together, but there's like that. And what makes it worse is that some fruit is born from this, which kind of pulls down this family a little bit, but it does have a semi-happy ending with this. I'm not going to spoil it for those who haven't seen the movie or read the play, but it's happy in one way, but then the other one, it's like, well, Troy, those chickens came home to roost, so you got to deal with them. Now, the whole family struggle is the main thing. Like, I've already touched on Troy's little thing with his son. He has another son from a previous relationship, which their relationship is a little antagonistic too, but since that son is older, theirs is a little different than his younger son. And the relationship spirals out of control so much because of the topic of race relations and how it ties in with Troy's past, because Troy used to play in the Negro Leagues back in the day. And he was a great baseball player. He feels he should have been in the majors, but wasn't. And he feels he was held down by the man. And when he says the man, he means, of course, the white establishment, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, those wasps. He feels they held him down. If it wasn't for them, he would have been the first black baseball star, not Jackie Robinson. He even at one point trashes Jackie Robinson, saying Jackie Robinson wasn't so great. I don't remember the exact dialogue, but that's the essence of it. Well, they mentioned it just briefly in passing, but it's there. The reason he wasn't in there wasn't because of his race. It was because he was too old. He was near over 40 when he was at the height of his playing thing. So it's like, they're not going to take a chance on you there. I mean, they don't even want you coming out of retirement or playing until then. So do you think they're going to want to take a chance on you even for one season at that age? No. And Troy just doesn't want to admit it wasn't that. He's still playing the race card. I know that's a bad thing to say, but in this case, Troy is playing that. Although, you could make the argument that race probably was a little bit of a backing reason why he was not brought up. But they probably looked at that, look at his age. Let's see, he's 4 years old and he's black. Alright, next, Jackie Robinson. Yeah, we'll go with him. And the way he looks at sports because of this, his idea of his son, his younger son, joining sports, even though he's great at it. And that is where they butt heads a little bit. And it comes to a head at the end when Troy basically tells these coaches he doesn't want his son playing anymore. And this leads to them getting into a verbal spat, which eventually leads to a physical spat, which I'm not going to spoil the results of, but you can tell from the dialogue and scenes before this that it's going to slowly go in that direction, and you don't want to see it happen, but you know it's inevitable after a point. And in another way, chickens come home to roost. And while he doesn't do sports, by the end of the play, the younger son has made a better life for himself. But you can only imagine, if he had actually joined sports, he might have actually done what his father couldn't. Which leads to another thing. His younger son actually thinks that part of the reason Troy doesn't want him to go in is because he fears that his son will do what he couldn't do, cross that racial line with sports, and actually succeed. And maybe there's a little bit of maybe there's some sense in that direction. You can definitely read that in certain scenes, but it seems more like Troy just being he's being an overprotective parent. And a little bit paranoid too. But Troy does cross one racial barrier successfully on his own, and that is he becomes the first black garbage truck driver for the company he works for. Granted, he has to go through the union and make some complaints, but he doesn't. But even then, he's not happy. He's bored. He says, I'm thinking of retiring. It feels like you're working by yourself. It's like... So with that, you can tell I did enjoy the play, even though our lead character is kind of a funny thing to compare him to, considering his occupation, but he is essentially garbage. But with that, I will say that he is a very well-rounded character, that you understand his motivations even if you don't agree with them. And even all the supporting characters are well-rounded. The only one that really isn't that deep is the character of Gabe, which is Troy's brother. He's essentially just there, just as a minor background character, who you can read a little bit of a religious angle into at the end. But he's there, especially since it kind of connects with the whole death theme of a tall tale Troy tells off and on throughout it, including one little monologue he has near the end. But he's essentially just there as a shell-shocked soldier who has a plate in his head, and not really a lot of depth to that, but considering he's not all day, you don't really need it to be well-rounded. He's the closest that this has to a flat character, who is actually a character you see on stage. The rest of them are rounded to a point, but the most well-rounded are Rose, Troy, and then, of course, their son. Which I think is interesting to mention, because compared to the family in the play that we read before this, which was the American classic Death of a Salesman, all the main characters are more well-rounded. That one, the title character and his older son are the most well-rounded. The younger one a little bit, but he's kind of the stereotypical player character. And he also has a little bit of that stereotypical younger brother vibe to him, but you can see how an actor can get a lot out of that. And then, of course, the wife in that play. Stereotypical housewife, but it seems it's more there just to be a foil to her husband and older son, so you can understand it. But going from that to this, where the wife, even if it has a little bit of that vibe to it, she's more well-rounded, and you can definitely see how an actress can get a lot out of her, especially in the film adaptation. From what I hear, I mean, the actress did win an Oscar for that performance, if I remember right, so you can see how you can get a lot out of this one just from reading the words. And like I've said a couple times, it is with my recommendation that you read this play. Even if you're not the biggest fan of reading plays, this is one that you want to read all the time. Now, I took a couple days to read it, mainly because I read when I have time off at work, lunch, and if I have a certain post where we can read. And of course, at home I would occasionally, but I mainly am spending my free time here doing the other half of the class. But definitely comes with my recommendation, and I am looking forward to watching the film adaptation of this play one day down the road.